And we are recording this session. Good evening, folks. We'll give everybody just another minute or two to get connected, and then we will start the webinar this evening.
You just let me know when I am cleared for takeoff, Mark, and if you could put the slides up when you're ready, that would be great.
Yep, I will do that right now.
Great. How are we doing with getting everyone in?
Think we're in a good spot. If you want to go ahead and get started, Superintendent King.
I sure will. Terrific. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening to discuss this very important topic about communication devices in our schools and how we move forward as a community together with some policies that really make sense for our kids and for our community. My name is Erin Kane. I have the great privilege of being the superintendent of Douglas County Schools. With me tonight, we have Chief Technology Officer Mark Blair with the blue sky background. We have Chief of Staff Steve Colella with his DCSD shirt on over here. And then we have Dr. Kelly Smith, who is our Director of Health and Wellness, and also just she has incredible expertise in adolescent brain development and in the impact that some of these devices have on adolescent brain development. So you will be really excited to hear from her, much more so than me. But I do want to introduce this topic tonight. Mark, if you could go to the next slide. Everything that we do as a district comes from our Board of Education ends. And we do have some of our Board of Education members with us tonight. I know Director Susan Meek is with us, and I am sure we have others as well. I do want to sincerely thank our volunteer Board of Education for all of the hard work that they do for our district and our kids. And part of that hard work is manifested in our Board of Education ends. These are the goals that the superintendent and the entire system works towards to make sure that our kids have the absolute brightest future possible. Next slide, please.
Just hang on one second.
You are all
There we
good.
go.
In response to the Board of Education ends, and along with a great deal of community input went into the Board of Education ends, and then we put additional community input into creating a strategic plan to help staff, to help the superintendent and my staff begin to work towards those ends and really map out what our plan was. I tell you all of this because this topic tonight is an important part of our plan. I want to give you just a really quick overview on the strategic plan for Douglas County Schools. By 2038, all DCSD graduates will be empowered to meet their future with competence, purpose, and optimism. Those words were selected very, very intentionally. We want our kids to be very purpose-driven. We want to make sure that we are providing them with all of the skills that they need to have that competence. And we want to make sure that they meet their future with optimism, because our kids do have incredibly bright futures in front of them. And it is our job to make sure that we equip them with everything they need to be able to make the absolute most out of that future. We have a number of cornerstone commitments as part of our strategic plan, but the one I want to highlight for you tonight is strategic technology integration. When we got all of the feedback from our community, and we got a lot of feedback through our written survey, but we also got a great deal of feedback through focus groups. Certainly staff, students, teachers, our parents, our community, our business leaders all responded to our survey, but we had focus groups with all of those folks as well, hundreds of people in focus groups, and it was really, really helpful information to get. When it comes to strategic technology integration, what we heard from our community loud and clear is that our community wants to make sure that their kids are prepared for the world that they are going to walk into, right? Not the world that we walked into, the world that they are going to walk into. And that means that we have to take advantage of every technological innovation out there and make sure that our kids can safely and ethically and responsibly leverage every technology innovation available to them, including artificial intelligence and the many other things that are coming. And our community expressed concern over the impact that device use has, especially in our young students and on their brains and on the distractibility that we're seeing all across the country. So strategic technology integration really speaks to balancing, addressing the negative impacts that technology can have on our students and on their brains, and ensuring that we are also leaning into all of the positive and really promising technologies that will help launch our students into their career and to have them be college ready. So that's really what we're talking about tonight, is how to balance the use of devices. We've seen many states across our country ban devices bell to bell in every school building in the state. For Douglas County School District, we want to take a really thoughtful approach where we look at elementary school and middle school and high school and the differing needs of our students, their different ages, their different maturity levels, and what it looks like in our school environment. And we really want to hear from you, our parent community, as we discuss this really important topic. So with this, I am going to hand it over to our Chief of Staff, Steve Colella. I do want to tell you a couple of important things. Once the presentation is over, at the end, we will have ample time for questions so that you can ask your questions in the Q&A, and we'll do everything that we can to address all of your questions. I'm actually attending an event tonight, that is looking into all of that's showing state chiefs of education and state leaders of education across our country, all of the latest research and outcome data on cell phone bans and what kinds of impacts those have had. So I will be out gathering a lot of information, but I wanted to be sure to kick this off and to thank all of you so much for participating. And we are going to compile everything together so that we can come up with a truly common sense policy that makes a lot of sense for our students, our community here in Douglas County, and for the best interest of our kids as we look towards the brightest future possible. So with that, Steve Colella, please take it away.
Thanks a lot, Superintendent Kane. If you can go to the next slide, Mark. As Superintendent Kane alluded to, Dr. Smith and I will take you through a brief-ish slide deck, a lot of really good information that we want to present. And so you know, this is the second of two meetings that we've held with our community about this. And for those of you who were at the first one, just to reiterate, this conversation tonight, or at least the slide deck and the information presented, will be substantially similar to the information that was presented in the first meeting. So if you didn't make that first meeting, you didn't miss anything, and thank you for being here tonight. We've got about 20 to 30 minutes of slides. And as Superintendent Kane alluded to, we want to allow for a maximum amount of time of Q&A. We'll go till about 7:15 with your questions and answer as many as we can. Along those lines, if you have questions, please enter them into the field at the bottom of your screen. Very likely, our CTO, Mark Blair, who's working the backbone of this meeting tonight, is going to take the questions, collate them, organize them, and ask them to Dr. Smith and I, and Mark will also help answer questions as well. We can't thank you enough for the interest in this topic. And again, as Superintendent Kane said, it's a gigantic one really across the country. We have had 3,400 responses to our survey as of a couple of hours ago. So if you've taken the survey, thank you so much for doing so. If you have not, we'll have a QR code at the end of this slide deck for you to click on, and you can take the survey then. This slide deck is also posted on a digital literacy webpage. So as Superintendent Kane alluded to, really basic. This conversation is very much tied into our strategic plan, particularly the strategic use of technology, but really this affects all of those cornerstones: academic excellence, mindsets and dispositions, among others. So again, just a really big topic. Next slide, please. Part of this conversation is really about tone and tenor. We strongly believe that cell phones in particular are incredible technological devices, incredible tools that, if used appropriately, allow a reach and a breadth of knowledge acquisition that's never existed before in human history. We all have, to the extent that you all have an Android or an iPhone, you have all of the world's knowledge at your fingertips. You have an ability to communicate with people from all over the world within seconds. It's an astonishing technological leap that we're all experiencing. And so the question for us only is, how do we best use it most productively, both professionally and in terms of our personal relationships? We know there are adults that struggle with the amount of phone use and how they use the phone. Certainly, kids are in that world too. And so our whole goal is to further this conversation so that we can give our kids the best shot at using this device as effectively as they possibly can. We're also showing along those lines, and Dr. Smith will take you through it, that there's emerging data. So we're at the point now where the technology is ripe enough to where we have emerging data showing that depending on our use, can be harmful. And again, I don't need to tell you, you've seen adults struggle with it, or some of our kids certainly are too. This is a pre-K to 12 conversation. Certainly high school it's a little more salient in that world. But this is really a beginning of school to end of school conversation, and we're going to frame it as such and continue to do so. Just as importantly, this is definitely a school conversation. The district and our staff have a level of control in terms of how kids use phones at school, but this is also certainly a home conversation. Our whole goal is to make sure that, one, we craft a policy, a very thoughtful policy that makes sense for our entire community, but two, also to make sure that our families have the resources they need to assess when is the appropriate time for their kids to have a cell phone, how they use it, ways to lock it down, etc. Next slide, please. We started this conversation really at the beginning of last year. As Superintendent Kane alluded to, this is part of our strategic plan process. We actually asked a question on that survey, the strategic plan survey, which we'll get to here in a second, along with AI and a variety of other topics. Mr. Blair and I went on a world tour of sorts in the district, went to various high schools and middle schools last year, brought pizza for lunch, talked to staff. It was awesome. Typically, when you bring pizza and it's free, you get a lot of staff coming and talk to you about whatever you want to talk about. And they did, and they're really, really thoughtful, and kids as well. And along those lines, we talked with leaders on a once-a-month basis to talk about their experiences with AI, along with their experiences with cell phones and what they were working through. We've got a digital literacy webpage, for those of you who may not know, that has a lot of resources, a lot of information, some of which Dr. Smith will talk about tonight. So we went whole hog last year, and we're continuing that conversation this year, into this year. Joining us was the state of Colorado. So in May of 2025, they passed a law stating that every school district must, by July 1, 2026, pass a policy for the use of communication devices. doesn't define or prescribe what the policy has to say. It can be Wild West, or it can be heavily restrictive, or something in between. The legislature just mandated that every district pass a policy, district and charter school included, pass a policy and have that policy posted for all to see by July 1 of 2026. The legislature used the word communication devices, so we do too. And they defined it as cell phones and smartwatches that are capable of making and receiving phone calls, sending and receiving text messages, etc. So they don't include in that conversation laptops, which are used for school purposes. And that's a big conversation too that we likely don't have time for tonight. But in any case, that's how state law defined it, and we are running with that definition. Next slide, please. So, as again, Superintendent King alluded to, a number of states have entered into this fray. So, about 26 have banned or limited cell phones at the state level. 3 have encouraged limiting. There's one executive order, I believe that's in Utah, where the governor essentially said we'd like to have cell phones out of schools as much as possible. And then 4, Colorado being one of them, require a policy adoption. And so again, Colorado is definitely not alone in this conversation. We are probably on the more permissive side of this conversation in terms of legislation that has come across. Next slide, please. So getting back to the strategic plan, we asked a question, an open-ended question, essentially asking our families and our community members how they felt about a ban given everything that's going on in the country. So if you go to the next slide, please. So we differentiated elementary, middle, and high school. And again, we're talking about a complete ban here. So in terms of elementary, almost 50% of our respondents supported a complete ban at elementary. Middle school is about 40%, high school about 30%. So there's a logic here, and as Superintendent Kane said, we're hoping to craft a policy that really respects the needs and where kids are at and where our staffs are at. And that's reflected in the initial survey data that we got from our strategic plan. The next slide, please. For those who didn't support a total ban, the reasons that we saw the most in the survey was some families and some parents wanted their kids to have access during lunchtime and passing periods. In the case of emergency, on its face, it completely makes sense for a kid to have a phone in case the worst were to happen, and we can talk more about that during Q&A at least. This was a really good one and really interesting one. All really thoughtful responses, but this one in particular has come up time and time again, particularly for our high school kids. They're going to need to use it in the real world. Okay, and if our goal is to make sure that they can use it appropriately and use it effectively, that training has to start somewhere. That certainly starts at home, but it also has its place in schools as well. That was the argument that these folks were making. It's a really good one and an interesting one. And then the last one is culturally, we have a number of teachers, again, particularly in high school, that allow kids to use their phones to access content. It's a very efficient and effective way to pair up kids with content where you're not wasting a ton of paper and you're not wasting a ton of time passing out that paper. And so we have that culture in the district, throughout the district. And so we have to take a look at that and consider that as we work on policy. Next. Just to give you a sample of some of the comments that came through in that strategic plan survey, there are a lot of them. And so what you'll see on the left as you're facing your screen, I characterized each of the comments in 1 or 2 words just for ease of access. And again, you'll have an ability to read all of these, but just really quickly, we had a number of families who said they want a full ban regardless. A lot commented on the fact and the reality that schoolwork is done through cell phones sometimes. Others commented that it's really handy, particularly for a middle schooler who doesn't drive or a high schooler who doesn't drive, for families to get in contact with them on at the drop of a hat in case, pickup logistics change, those sorts of things. Safety was also a big one. And we heard that. We've talked to a lot of kids as well last year and this year. Safety is forefront on their minds as well. So again, a lot of really interesting and thoughtful commentary. Next. So as I said, we went on that tour and brought pizza and had conversations, and we just wanted to get a sense for where our staff was at. So based on their experience, what grade did they think was most appropriate for a student to have a smartphone? So we had about 118 responses, so not a huge sample size, but it tells us something. And the vast majority said no earlier than 6th to 8th grade. Which is really interesting. And I will tell you that a good chunk of survey data that we've received to date, those 3,400, that's about kind of where it lands. It's really, really interesting. So just for your reference, we wanted to give that to you. Next. Again, a lot of commentary. FOMO is a big deal. So what do you do if you've got a 7th grader or a 6th grader and you're saying to them, hey, son, daughter, you can't have a phone just for a variety of reasons. And that makes sense in a vacuum. But what happens when they go to school and most of their peers, if not all of their peers, have a phone and are interacting, etc.? That's something that parents, and I'm one of them, have to deal with and navigate, either with school and or with their friends' parents, and that's a tough issue. Kids have said that they feel like they're addicted, and feel like whenever they don't have their phones for whatever reason, that there's more social interaction taking place, and they feel like that's better. And on the one hand, on the other hand, everybody recognizes again what an incredible tool this is, and the ability to connect, hopefully mostly productively through social media and other messaging apps is really, really important. Next. Dr. Smith.
All right, thank you. So I want to talk a little bit. First, I want to tell you that I have kids, so I've dealt with this as a parent, and I am a 32-year educator with about 17 years as a school principal. So I've seen it all. I started as a principal prior to even having cell phones and widespread internet. So this has been an evolution for me as an educator and as a parent. So I'm speaking to this from both sides. So what I want to talk about is just a little bit about brain development and the positive and negative things that we're seeing with screen use in kids. And there'll be a lot more information to come. So I was looking at some of the questions we had last time. This will just be a snippet, but we're doing a lot of work in Douglas County with other organizations like Colorado State University Prevention Research Center to provide more information to families. So we won't be able to answer it all today, but this is just a snippet. So some of the data that we're seeing right now, we have about 50% of kids that are 4 and younger that are engaging with smartphones regularly, 8 to 12, 4 to 6 hours a day. And the teen use is what we're seeing is exploding with 7+ hours a day on screens. And that is not including what they're doing at school. And then 95% of those teens have smartphones and say that half of them are online almost constantly. And then the amount of teens with social media, that's typically what they're doing on their phones. Next slide, please. So it's important when we think about screens, it's not all good, it's not all bad. It's what are they doing in their engagement with the environment and the world that's creating these neural pathways. So we know when brains are developed that when kids learn something new, it creates this neural pathway. And the more they do the same thing, it creates a stronger pathway. So that is their pathway for learning. And we know that when kids interact in the world, however they interact, that's what shapes their brain. So next slide, please. Neural pathway construction explodes in age 0 through 5. So if you're a parent that has little ones before they're even entering school, we're seeing a lot of research coming out now of kids that have cell phone and use and screen use with the littles. That's changing the way that their brains are being built because they're using those over and above other things that they've used in the past. Next slide, please. So I want you to think about pathway development around how kids are interacting in the world. So positive or adversely, whatever kids are interacting with, that is shaping the pathways of their brains. And we know that pathway development is what is the foundation for all future learning, self-regulation behavior, and even their health and wellness as they grow older. Next slide, please. So this is, we had the privilege of speaking or hearing a 26-year-old young man who was just out of college speaking about his experience with cell phones. And this slide resonated with me because he talked about our current data that we have right now around screen use and social media use with teens is showing that an average 18-year-old, if you were to have that child live to 90, these dots each represent 1 month of that life. And on average, that average 18-year-old between now and 90 would sleep 288 months, work 126 months, cooking, bathroom, you get the idea. And then these black dots, that's what's left. So what he talked about when he looked at the amount of time that kids are on social media and screen time now at 18, if they stay on track with that, 93% of their remaining free time will be looking at a screen. And that was striking to me because you think about what you do in your life is what forms who you are. So what you're interacting with in your environment is creating the person that you want to be. And I think that is really powerful. So this slide deck will be available on our district website. And he has a TED Talk that I put a QR code for that you can watch that. It's pretty powerful, speaking from a young adult with his experience on social media addiction. Next slide, please. So I want to be cautious. I added this from the last presentation because I want to be really careful about saying that all screens are not bad. There's lots of great things that are coming out of technology. So I added this pyramid, and I like to think about it like the nutrition pyramid that we taught kids when they were little. So there are good things that you can do on screens and create content. There's lots of jobs that have come out of technology and screens. So I love this. From the Social Institute, they do a lot of work around education for youth and interviewing youth about their screen time use. But when you talk about watching movies with family and playing games together and video chatting, I know that when my kids were young, we were able to see their grandparents with FaceTime, and it helped us connect. So there's lots of great things that you can do and interact and have positive experiences. What we're talking about with excessive screen use is when we get to the top of the pyramid, and it's that scrolling and that passive use and those 15-second clips that are changing the way kids' attention spans are being built in their brains. So I want you to think about not all of it's bad, because we talked last time and we got into a pretty hearty discussion around screen use in schools, but not all screen time is equal. That would be the point here. So next slide, please. So this one, there are great things that do come out of mental health and well-being benefits of technology. Like I said, stronger connections, creative expression, youth being able to connect with others, a safe space for kids that might feel that they don't have that group of friends at their school or in their community. And then a lot of times we search for things that we're interested or some mental health resources to help us really understand who we are with mindfulness. I do yoga and I get that off of social media. So there are some great benefits that come out of technology. Next slide, please. But I do want to talk, because I know as a parent, when I was researching this 3 or 4 years ago, I was really shocked being in the education world and having kids, that there was a lot of stuff around brain development and screen and social media that I didn't know. So my big calling now is to just let parents know so they can make really informed decisions. So I want to talk very briefly about these 6 critical impact areas that are really important for parents of all ages to understand. So we're going to talk about language and social skills, addiction pathways, brain growth, sleep disruption, and fractured attention, and this well-being. These are the 6 core pieces that we're seeing in the research that screen time and social media use is impacting in a negative way. Next slide, please. So we're seeing in our preschools right now, when young children are accessing screens for extended periods of time and not really interacting with other peers or adults or having any kind of person-to-person interaction, the part of their brain that processes visual content is growing bigger than the auditory cortex, which processes auditory sound. And the auditory part of the brain in natural development outside of screen use should be bigger than visual. And that's what helps that social skill development. And we're seeing the reverse of that in MRI studies of young children who are on screens a lot. So what we're seeing is it's reducing this white matter growth in their brains that's responsible for language acquisition. We saw a huge uptick in our early childhood programs with social emotion or with language acquisition and kids being able to even talk and interact when they were in preschool. And that is something that we've seen nationally as well. And there's a QR code on that one too. Social skills. So this is just about replacement. So if kids are on screens throughout childhood and not interacting socially, they're not developing relationships with kids their age, they're not having conflict and learning how to get out of that conflict. They're not developing these critical skills that they need when they get into school. So I was a school principal not too long ago, and we saw a shift in our K-1-2 kiddos that had more screen use and not being able to navigate that natural conflict that kids are supposed to be able to understand how to do on the playground, just not having the skill set when they came into school to be able to do that. So again, it's about what are you doing in place of learning these social skills. Next slide. And then well-being. And so a lot of parents have seen the new book by Jonathan Haidt, and I have a slide in here in a second on that, where he talks about the mental health outcomes that we're now seeing in youth that are on cell phones and social media a lot. And there's this critical tipping point, this 2 to 3 hours a day, and it keeps kind of flexing, because when I first started doing this research 3 years ago, the pediatricians and psychologists of pediatrics were saying no more than 2 hours of screen time a day, and now they're saying no screen time. So for the littles when they're young, so it's when we know more, we're learning more, and they're changing their recommendations. So this 2 to 3 hours, I would be willing to bet the younger kids go, the less they're going to say that that's okay. Content exposure, we know as educators and as parents that we have restrictions on movie ratings because kids that have developing brains can't process mature content. It doesn't compute. It actually in some places can be very harmful and traumatic to developing brains. Cyberbullying, body image issues that can cause to eating disorders. In my department, I oversee school nursing, and one of the things that we talk about a lot is the uptick in eating disorders in our teens and adolescent youth that is more than we've ever seen before, and it is being attributed to these interactions on social media. Disrupted healthy activities. So again, what are kids doing in place of sleep, physical activity, social connection? If they're on cell phones and social media and not getting that, it's replacing some of these healthy habits. And then we talk about protective factors in our world on prevention. And protective factors are kids that are interacting in pro-social ways. And if they're not able to interact in those ways, then they're in absence of those. And then they become more susceptible to risk behaviors. So next slide, please. So this is the slide that Jonathan Haidt referenced when he was talking to the Senate Judiciary Committee around cell phones and social media. And he had a graph of when that mental health issue started to spike. And it was really at that 2-hour mark. And it really led to depression and anxiety. And we see that with our kiddos in Douglas County as well. And there's links in this deck that you can look at that study as well. Next slide, please. I know I said something was very striking to me earlier, but this is also a pretty striking fact that we've recently had lots of conversations with my team about is this addiction pathways. Now, in the prevention world that I live in, we talk a lot about drugs and alcohol addiction, and what they're finding in MRIs of self-proclaimed addicts of social media is that their brains are starting to look like the brains of drug addicted folks. So when you think about high dopamine activities, those things that are risky behaviors that create an increase in dopamine, it feels good, so they continue to do it. When people are off screen, not on screens, those activities are drugs, alcohol, and gambling. They increase those dopamine levels, and the more they increase, the more they need to feel the same high, so to speak. And the same is happening with young people that are addicted to video games, social media, and internet surfing. And this can happen to adults as well, but it's really important to consider brains are still developing and so plastic, and that neuroplasticity where they're continuing to grow and change. And it's so detrimental to those young brains to be addicted at that level. Next slide, please. So this is just an MRI of these high dopamine activities of when brains light up. I actually saw an advertisement just recently advertising VR, the virtual reality glasses, and the ad had an MRI on it of a screen. Look at how great this is. This lights up their brain, and it showed a really lit up brain. And as a parent, I thought, well, that scares me, because when you're putting those on a young child, think about all the pathways that are being lit up and the brain regions that are being lit up that we don't know what the long-term consequences are. So we're starting to see this increase in dopamine and this addiction in young kids. Further on in their lives, they're having difficulty finding satisfaction in things that are outside screen use. They have impulse control, heightened anxiety. Their tolerance for needing more screen time is different than kids that are on it. This altered reward pathway is very dangerous. Next slide, please. And then sleep. Someone asked me, we were doing, I think it was a icebreaker, if you could wave your magic wand and change one thing in the world right now, what would it be? And immediately I said, if our kids got the recommended amount of sleep, we would see drastic differences in learning and behavior, because we know that sleep regenerates the brain, and that's so important in young people. There's different sleep cycles that happen that young kids need. We as adults need it. It helps solidify learning, it repairs the brain, and it really helps kids process through the emotional things that have happened during the day. If you're interested in more on that, this book I highly recommend, called Why We Sleep. You will be sold, and your kids will be in bed at 8 o'clock every night, I guarantee it. So sleep deprivation is a real thing. And when kids are on screens, there's lots of things that you can go to the next one. Thank you, Mark. I'm good on this. And so the impacts can be very, very damaging to young kids. And I always ask teachers when I do this presentation to them, like, do you have kids that come to you and they're like the little girl at the top where they're really sleepy, and then the next minute something switches and they're just crazy, and then the next one they're in tears, and the next one they're really angry, and staff are like, yes, I know who that is, and yes, I see that in my own kids. Well, the number one thing that we should be asking is, what's the sleep schedule? Because what happens when kids are sleep deprived is it severs the connection between their frontal lobe, where it makes all those executive functioning and logical thinking decisions, and their impulsivity part of their brain. They can't regulate their emotions, and they're all over the place. And they're actually doing studies around sleep deprivation and school violence, and finding that violence and bullying may be attributed to kids who have really impacted sleep cycles. So I think it's a really interesting thing that we need to dive into. And our school nurses are actually on top of this and teaching sleep lessons in our schools now to help get out in front of this for our kids so they understand. So that's my soapbox on that one. Next slide, please. So just nearing the end of this, one of the things that we talk about all the time is how young is too young. And I know that Steve talked a minute ago about the survey. When do we think kids should have a phone? If you're not familiar with Common Sense Media, it's a great website for parents and educators to find a lot of current research on cell phone and social media use. But right now, they're saying that 42% of kids have a phone by age 10. That's a lot when you think about what is it replacing and how is it changing their brain so that they're able to be successful later in life. So what I am trying to get out into our district and our community is, I think we're asking the wrong question when we ask people about what age should kids have phones. So if you go to the next slide, this is the answer. It's not about the age, it's about social awareness and how mature your child is on understanding of what technology means. So if you go to the next slide, these are the questions if you're considering buying a smartphone. We know that not all kids develop the same. So a child that's 11 might be definitely more mature than a child who's 16. I know that my two girls were very different at 16 years old. One of them was more mature in areas than the other one. So I would ask, how often does your child lose things? If they can't bring their water bottle home or their lunchbox home every day, I wouldn't give them $1,000 smartphone. That's something that you could have a conversation with. How do they handle money? I have heard stories of in-app purchases where kids have rung up their credit cards or parents' credit card bills because they're impulsive and they can't not say no to those in-app purchases. And I think most importantly is if you have a child for whatever reason struggles with social cues or has some developmental differences where social interaction is hard for them, social media and screen time will only make it worse if it's not regulated. So if a child has those issues, I would wait as long as possible to put a device in their hand that we now know inhibits social growth. And then how savvy is your child about technology? Do they know what a digital footprint is? Do they understand what social media algorithms are doing? Do they get that? Do they know that every employer will be looking up their social media footprint before they're hired? That's something that as a person who hires people, I've never hired someone since the onset of social media that I haven't looked up and done a Google search. So I think that's important that kids understand that. And then how well does your child handle limits? So if they struggle with going to bed on time and closing things down, it would be very challenging if they're then have full access to a phone or screen time. And you're going to find yourself having lots of battles with that. So that is just a little snippet of, this is the website that Steve was talking about with digital literacy. We continue to add lots of new stuff. I did see a question come through about if Superintendent Kane would be sharing the research that she has. We put everything on this website. So I will turn it over to Steve and Mark, but thank you. And I am happy to answer whatever questions you have.
Dr. Smith, thank you so much. Really important information as a parent myself. Getting this kind of information, having access to our digital literacy page is a really big deal, and we hope will help you all navigate cell phone use in your own kids' lives, and wherever you fall on that. We just want to make sure you have all the information that we have to be able to make those assessments. It's really, really important. Next slide, please. So just to give you a sense of the timeline of the policy that we're working through, and then we'll get to your questions in really short order. So right now, we're obviously on that bottom, that second bullet on the bottom, where we've had family conversations. We're busy gathering family input, and we've had a lot of staff, a lot of students, a lot of leader input, community input as well. And we're in that process heading into potentially policy review by the Board of Education in either December or January. And I have tentative there because as you probably know, we have 4 new board members who are very likely drinking from a fire hose at this point. And so we want to make sure that the board has the easy ability to access all of the data that we have at a time that makes sense for the board. And so that's why we say, again, either December, January, give or take, and certainly that'll be publicized once that's set in stone. And that should be set in stone relatively soon. And then after the policy is finalized by the Board of Education, we're looking at a February through August preparation and implementation. One of the questions we ask of everyone is, what's a fair time to start implementation of the policy? Is it August of 2026? Is it in March right away? Whatever the case might be, we wanted to get a sense from staff, from students, from our leaders, and from our families what timing makes sense. So that'll be part of the conversation as we move forward. Next slide, please. And you have my email address there. If you have any questions, after you leave here, if you have additional questions, you can please feel free to reach out to me. Very happy to take them. And this has been a phenomenal conversation for the last year and a half. And we really look forward to continuing both through the policy and beyond. So with that, we will take your questions. And just so you know, and there's a QR code to the survey. If you haven't taken it, please have at it. And tell your friends if they haven't taken it as well. We'd love to hear from them. We are between the two meetings constructing an FAQ that we'll post on the webpage. So the frequently asked questions from last meeting to this meeting we'll post, and question and answer, obviously. And what we'll do too is we'll post the survey redacted properly ahead of that board meeting where the policy is considered. So everybody has access to all the data that we're looking at too. So just so you know, with that, what questions do we have?
Second, just stopping my screen share so we can see everything. So first question, how many schools within the district already have no personal electronic device bell-to-bell policy already?
So that would be virtually all of our elementary and all of our middle schools. So there are a few schools with exceptions, but by and large, our elementaries and our middle schools are bell to bell, meaning bring your phone to school. Once the bell rings, you don't see it again until the end of the day bell rings. The high schools are a bit of a mixed bag. Some have a come as you are policy, so use it whenever you deem appropriate. And again, it goes to that, listen, you're going to be an adult soon and have to use it. So better you learn how to use it now and get the repercussions if you use it inappropriately. Others of our high schools have you walk into class, you put your phone and or watch into a phone cubby, and it stays there for the entirety of the class unless the teacher allows you to take it out. So that's how it breaks down to date.
Great, thank you. Let's see here. Will we be able to talk about cell phone usage on the bus to and from school?
Really good question. Our current policy is that it's allowed, but I will tell you, whoever brought that up, you're not the only one to bring that up. That's a really good question and a tough conversation just in terms of the logistics. So you can imagine a bus driver of a gen ed bus with about 60 kids, and it's just him or her on the bus driving. It becomes very, very difficult to affect a policy that says no phones on the bus. Nevertheless, getting to the spirit of your question, we think that there's room for that. It's just a question of can we reasonably do it? And Mark and Kelly, if you have more to add, feel free to any of this, really.
Good.
Yeah, same. I think that would be really hard to enforce.
Yeah.
This question Kelly already touched on a little bit is with Superintendent Kane attending an event tonight that exposes statistics about school technology integration and parameters, bans, guidelines. When can we expect to hear back from her on what statistics she learned? I would say we will be able to post some of that information on our digital literacy page and potentially in a future update to the Board of Education. I don't know if you want to agree, change any of that, Steve?
No, that's about right. And I think, and Kelly, feel free to weigh in on this, obviously. I think we're starting to see a relative consistency in the data. I don't know of an entity and or a school district who's faced with this conversation that is saying, hey, you know what, Wild West is the best possible option, given all of the data that's coming out. And of course, Wild West, I mean, like kids can bring it and use it whenever they want without repercussion. So, but absolutely, otherwise, that's a lot of data and information we posted on our webpage. Kelly, I don't know if you're into that.
I did read one study because I think and I can't remember, it might have been LA Unified, because they were the first large district that banned phones last school year. And then what schools are starting to report and districts are starting to report is the total ban isn't changing habits. And most of the negative doom scrolling, the top of the pyramid, is happening outside of school. And so it's not changing mental health outcomes drastically for kids. They might be learning more social things within school, but it really isn't changing drastically the mental health outcome, which was kind of disappointing to hear, but it makes a lot of sense. So.
And relatedly, from a policy and an implementation perspective, part of the reason why we've taken a year and a half, give or take, to get to a policy is to have these conversations really across the district. And what that does is, one, it gets you to more thoughtful policy, but two, it helps ensure that enforcement, buy-in at home is maximized. So along those lines, when we ask, well, what's a fair time period for implementation? That goes directly to, like, one, can you do it well? And two, making sure everybody has the ability to roll into that new policy, again, maximizing buy-in and effectiveness of the policy. So each of these school districts, particularly the big ones, are an interesting story in terms of how they implemented. Some were very top down. That's not going great from what we've read to a great extent. And others were slow rolled a little bit, and those are, you get better outcomes then. So in any case.
Okay, next question. I totally understand your reasoning and intentions. I particularly disagree with banning phones for the whole day. Some of our children depend on phones during periods like access and lunch to essentially keep track of updates in classes. It's also only way for them to communicate with during those work times. Will this bill be for all day or during class times? I believe it should be only implemented during class periods and be accessible during switch periods and access periods.
No, great question, and thank you for the feedback. The law that was passed is agnostic in terms of the policy that every district implements. We're looking at policies separate for elementary, from middle, from high school. And your feedback, I assume you're probably a high school parent, I'm guessing. Your feedback's really well taken. Thank you.
Great. I'm curious if there's been any discussion about creating curriculum, i.e. a class that focuses on technology use connected to wellness classes maybe, and navigating social media. I'm concerned if it's banned, kids don't learn.
I'll take that one. This is right up my alley. Yes, our department has a lot of resources. We actually just implemented Wayfinder, which has a digital literacy suite, and they're updating daily things on AI and how we can teach kids healthy habits. So I'm a huge proponent as an educator that we have to teach kids how to interact. This is a tool that's not going away. And part of education is helping kids think critically about technology. So we have already infused that into our schools. Our counselors are doing things with it. So yes, I'd be happy to talk more with parents or send something out that shows exactly what some of those lessons look like, but we've got some really good content.
Great, thanks, Kelly. Next question. Right now, our middle school teachers are, number one, allowing students to play on their phones during class time, which seems completely contrary to DCSD goals. Number two, there's an expectation that kids have cell phones during class to look up things. This creates a huge visible barrier between kids who have families who can provide expensive cell phones and kids who do not. A bell-to-bell policy will eliminate these socioeconomic discrepancies between students. Wouldn't that be important for the goals of DCSD as well?
Yes, that is important. Where you have whether middle school or high school, a culture of, hey kids, take out your phones to access said information. We have an ability as a district on a limited basis to be able to help kids who maybe don't have, maybe they forgot their technology that day. As we all know, that happens. So a loose laptop that they can access for a day or for a lesson or throughout the entire year. We work with families constantly and those kinds of scenarios to make sure that every kid can access the curricula and have a great educational experience. So again, your point's really well taken.
Great, thank you. If you decide to ban cell phone usage, how will it be enforced and what are the consequences for having one?
So that can range. So again, we're in the process of creating that workflow, for lack of a better description. So one way to do it would be for the district to say from on high, wherever you have an infraction, this, that, or the other will happen. Alternatively, what you can do is to say here as a policy, here's what we'd like to do, here's what we'd like to have happen, and then allow buildings to work with that in terms of consequences on a case by case or maybe just school by school basis. And you can do it that way too. So that we're still working that through.
Great. I'm a pediatrician and see the detrimental effects of cell phone use daily in my practice. Medical literature is showing that almost any use is leading to worse academic outcomes and increased anxiety/depression. I have not seen any literature at all suggesting the benefit of personal device use at any age in schools. I would be interested if you have seen differently. This is different from using school devices to learn about technology or access needed content, which has merit.
I've got a comment, but Kelly, if you want to have at them.
I read that comment ahead of Mark did. I agree. I think it goes back to that pyramid. And I think the littles, elementary, have no need to be on any type of social media. And I think we can do a lot of education within our schools around what kids are doing on technology in school, because now we know more. We can do better with that. So I agree with everything that she said in the comment.
And it's just really quickly, as far as middle and high school, it's really what you brought up brings up two things in my mind. One, that home conversation is gigantic. And again, our goal and role is to provide information as we have and will continue to do. The second one is your point's really, really well taken. So and for middle and high school, what's the proper role of school? And again, home being a big part of this conversation too. But what's the proper role of school to help acculturate kids to using cell phones at an appropriate time? So, for example, if it's bell to bell, you're sending a message, and I infer from the comment that that'd be a good message. Let's say high school, for example, you said, hey, students, once you come into class, you can have your phone, but once you come into class, you put the phone away in a cubby and it's over there. That also sends a message. For example, it sends the message that when it comes time to, not only go to school, but also attend a meeting or have a personal conversation, a heavy conversation of any sort, the phone goes away. And maybe that's in a pocket or wherever the case might be as an adult, but it starts to create those kind of tendencies and habits that arguably are helpful. So a lot to that conversation, and thanks again for the feedback.
All right. I'm hearing mainly talk about actual devices like tablets, smartphones. I have an 8-year-old and he wears a Garmin watch geared toward young kids. I have school mode enabled, which locks it down based on GPS location at the school other than an emergency contact function. This is what I'm hoping isn't banned. Even if not locked down, it cannot be made to make calls or video message, only basic SMS. What this webinar sounds like is the distraction on social media or browsing research is passive.
That's the spirit of this conversation. And what we're working through are the exceptions like the one you were talking about. Should there be. And part of that is likely, no matter where we fall in terms of policy, there will likely be exceptions that every building would have to look at and assess. And all of us, our building leaders, district staff, doctors, all of us are very open to assessing what those exceptions look like. And shoot, if we see a number of those exceptions to the point where it should become a rule, I think all of us, and as a district, we're thoughtful enough to revisit whatever policy we come up with and and work and include those. So
We
really good
also have a lot
question.
of students that are using cell phones to help monitor their health conditions, whether it's diabetes or other types of things. So those would most likely be an exception with our policy as well, so that health monitoring can continue.
Yeah, and I'll just take it one step further. For those of you who have kids in IEP who require cell phones, communication devices to help service the IEP, the policy would absolutely allow for those things to happen. So that policy never overcomes state or federal law.
Okay. I appreciate what is being discussed here, but I want to make sure that this is not going to be used to keep kids from having a phone at school, which is needed in emergency situations. Until we do not have the threats of school shooting, the kids need their phones. They are often the first ones to reach 911. Kids need to be able to reach 911 and parents at any time.
I'll start, and if you both want to add, really good question, and this has come up pretty much every meeting that we have, whether it be kids, whether it be staff, whether it be leaders, and families. On its face, what you say has a lot of value, and even beyond that. This has got to be a bigger conversation, and here's in part why. Law enforcement will tell you, or a lot of law enforcement that we work with will tell you that the last thing you want in a hellacious emergency is a kid on a cell phone. They're not listening, they're making noise. To the extent that they're providing information, a lot of times that information is wrong. To the extent that that kid is contacting their parents and saying whatever they're saying. And again, I'm one of those parents, I suspect my colleagues are too, who if they know that something horrible is happening at their school, their first instinct is to run to school, which then creates an issue for police who are trying to navigate the unknown, and potentially puts those families at risk depending on how close they get. So again, your point's really well taken. There is a lot to that conversation, and there's no easy answer on that, frankly, because to your point, there have been instances where a kid on a cell phone has helped. There's no doubt about that, and frankly, it can help in a whole host of ways that don't pertain to situations as horrible as, let's say, a school shooting, where a kid on a cell phone providing information was helpful. So we're very mindful of all of that, and we'll navigate it thoughtfully, or as thoughtfully as we possibly can.
Great, thank you. So this one kind of touches back on Dr. Smith's comments about sleep. So are teachers going to be stop giving homework so kids can get to bed at time? My son, who recently graduated top of his class and was in AP and IB and regularly had to pull all-nighters. He did not have a job and he was literally studying the entire time. The workload was immense and the only thing he could do was sacrifice sleep.
I'll take a stab at it, being a principal and a child that also experienced AP classes. I think that sleep is so important. If that is detracting from it, then there needs to be a conversation with the school, and with how can he help? How can you help manage your son's time a little bit with that? Because pulling all-nighters in high school, that scares me a little bit, especially if they're sleep deprived and they're driving. So I think that's definitely a conversation with the school. I have not heard of a high school student that's pulled all-nighters with homework. But that, to me as a parent, I would have a conversation with the school.
As a parent, former social studies teacher, go history, and school leader, I would very much agree with that.
Yeah, it's a
Right.
whole child. Like if your child's not well, they're not going to excel academically. And read that book, the Why We Sleep book, because there's a study that they did in there with college kids that they did have students learn during the day and pull all-nighters and then take a test, and they were markedly further behind academically than kids that had a full 8 hours of sleep. So I would pick sleep over studying 100 times and twice on Sunday, because academically you're going to thrive. Yeah.
I'll weave in the cell phone dynamic. It wouldn't surprise me to know that we would see more of that, given kids' use of cell phones after hours and distracting themselves, whatever the case might be. I'm not saying that that's happened in your instance. Whoever said that, I don't honestly know, but I would imagine generally that's probably happening more and more.
Yeah, I would agree.
This one, Steve, you've mentioned this in a couple other conversations I've been in, so I think it might be good for this audience. Are there any formal parent groups in the district that agree not to give their children cell phones until 18 years old?
There's
That's a really good That's
there's
a
talk.
really good question. In fact, Kelly, Dr. Smith might have more visibility on that than me.
I've done longer presentations at a couple of different elementary schools, and the PTOs are very interested. But that this sounds counterintuitive, but there are lots of Facebook groups that have moms together, and I do think that that's something that there is I think there's a slow swell of support around that.
I'll tell you personally, my wife and I have these conversations with our kids, friends, parents, pretty much all of the time. It's hard.
Yeah.
It is. Great, thank you. Let's see here. What do parents do who really don't want their children to have a phone? Then we're being told by the student and teachers that they can't turn in their work without a phone.
That's interesting. So without a phone, because I would say that that's the computer, like we do everything. We're a Google district. It's much easier to do that on a computer. But I think in things, whenever you're hearing from, this is just as a parent speaking, and I know as a former principal, whenever kids come home and say, we're not allowed to do this, if you kind of have to tilt your head a little bit, I would have a conversation with the school, because I have never, in my role as a principal, a teacher, have ever said absolutely black and white no. So I would, yeah.
Yeah, a Chromebook can take care of anything that a phone can.
Yeah.
And yes, to highlight and to buttress what Dr. Smith said, please have a conversation with your kid's teacher and or principal.
That's a great point too, because Chromebooks are like $125, a phone's $1,000.
Yeah.
So if that's really kind of the sticking point, you can really lock down a Chromebook.
Yeah. And again, if the cost of that's an issue, whatever the cost might be, please have a conversation with your teacher and principal. We do a lot to help with families on that.
Yep, absolutely.
So this one kind of touches on, some of the out of school engagement that we have seen and is in a lot of studies and things like that. And Dino kind of talked about it in his presentation. Have we thought about what alternative opportunities for social interactions Douglas County can provide for our students? When I looked at the black dots for the 18-year-old, I wondered, unless they're going to the quote bar, what else is there for our youth to do with their unstructured time? Youth clubs, youth gyms. Not all of our kids live close enough to each other to play in the streets.
I know when I was a kid growing up in the 70s and 80s, there were some kids in the neighborhood, but we did a lot of imaginary play, especially when they're young. They come up with stuff. Boredom is the best case for building great pathways in kids. Reading, drawing, writing. There's so many things. I could keep going. My kids roll their eyes when I say that. But there's so many things. I would love to put a kid in a room and say, figure it out, and take all the screens away. They'll figure it out. Our kids are smarter than us. They'll figure it out.
So if I may admit, at times I'm a Neanderthal dad, and that's exactly what I do. And it's just go play, go be bored, go stare at a wall. And I mean, again, that's just kind of my approach. I love it,
Toys,
hate it.
yeah.
And I know of other families and moms and dads that do that. And there's definitely no shame in doing that, and we're all empowered to do it.
Awesome. Trying to sift through some of these that we haven't got to. What is the pro argument for an elementary student having a smart device inside a classroom? Not in the building, but in class. I don't understand the viewed benefit.
I don't think we have any. Being an elementary principal, I don't think we have cell phones in the classrooms.
No, that's the case. It's a bell-to-bell ban. So you'll have kids bring cell phones. Typically, it's fifth grade, sixth grade. They'll bring cell phones, but the cell phones will stay in their backpack. And this is not a pro or con necessarily. Whoever asked it, it's what we've heard, and that is so it makes it easier for pickup, for example. It gives parents some solace in case like the craziness were to happen. There's an ability for the kid to reach out to the family instead of, let's say, a principal, maybe quicker than a principal or whomever. There are times we have families who like to check in with their kids as soon as possible. So whether that be before the bell or after the bell, there may be times when there is a, let's say, sick family member, and there's a need by the family to update the kid about the sick family member, for example. And listen, you can argue pro and con for each of those scenarios. Those are just the scenarios that we've heard. Good question.
Great.
All of these are great questions.
Yeah, no, they're great questions. And we've got a lot of them. We may not get through all of them, but we'll definitely
10 more minutes.
We'll get through quite a few of them. So you mentioned having conversations over the past year and a half with staff, students, parents, et cetera, about digital use. But the state of Colorado just notified, I think, the district in May of this year about the need to publish a policy by 7/26. Was this mandate by the state something you anticipated, or what spurred the conversation / data collection starting far before May of this year?
Really good question. And Dr. Smith, have at it.
Well, I think a lot of this stemmed from the health advisory that came out from the Surgeon General in 2023. And then a lot of districts started saying, oh, okay, what's happening? And states started doing it. So I think it started then. And I think Colorado was pretty thoughtful about waiting a bit because we're benefiting from the districts that did it first. So we can kind of see how it played out. That would be my take. But I think that's my opinion.
I think that's part of the context. I think the other thing is and again, I don't need to tell you all, it's easy to see. It just is. And so on top of everything else happening on a macro level, we see kids at school, at home, just in it and never leaving it. And it's not hard to figure out or have a sense for this may not be the best, particularly in school, particularly during class. And so that was part of the conversation that started over a year and a half ago. The other thing that was important, and I think Dr. Smith, you at least implicitly hit on it. There was a big focus and lens on social media. And so with phones being a proxy or a conduit to social media and the amount of data coming out about the harmful effects of social media on young kids, that also became part of this impetus in this conversation. So yeah, the state came out after we did, but we were really heading towards this conversation, even if the legislature had not stepped in. We had heard rumblings about the legislature stepping in and doing something. We didn't quite know what exactly that would look like over the last year or two. But in any event, we figured that our efforts would be in line with the state, and it lined up pretty nicely for us. It's one more kind of, hey, impetus for, listen, we've got something to do here, but we knew that, like I said, about a year and a half ago.
Well, and I think that every school in our district has a cell phone policy. When I started as a principal in 2004, we had an electronics policy. We didn't call them cell phones, but so I think systemizing it across the district will be much more helpful to families.
Yeah, and we have an existing policy that was last updated in 2013. So think about the leaps in technology since then. It's just warranted to have a look at it and really update it to what's happening in 2025. So, and Dr. Smith is right. All of our schools have in one form or another an approach, having that system-wide approach, that thread that pulls through all schools, makes a heck of a lot of sense, very arguably.
All right. I just lost it. Oh, not a question, but more of a suggestion. Every parent should read Jonathan Haidt's book, Anxious Generation. It's an excellent resource on this topic, backed by a ton of research. It's a very interesting read as too. And I think all of us have read it at least once. I know I've read it twice and skimmed through some of the highlights again a third time because I was mixing up some of my facts. But it is a great book, and it gives a lot of fabulous information related to this topic and how it's affecting our children.
Read that and a sleep book. You'll be good to go. Get in another jab.
Kelly's not getting a kickback on the sleep book, so
No.
just throw that out there.
I'm a huge fan though.
Dr. Smith is our Oprah.
Oh, that's right. She's going to start a book club. You start a book club. Let's go.
They're dead on. Those are great books.
Yeah. Will the policy address parents and holding them accountable for violating cell phone usage? I know parents often text their kids during the school day, and this can be very disruptive to teachers and other students.
So it's a very tricky business to draft a policy that imposes consequences on parents for stuff like this. The thing that we can do and should do and continue to do and have been doing is having these conversations, asking questions, sometimes very, very tough and very, very uncomfortable. A la, should a, let's say, 6th grade parent need to be in touch all day long? And Mark and I came across this a few times, and this really crystallized it for us. A high school kid said that it's important for him to have his phone because if he's having a bad day, feeling anxious, got a bad score on a test, whatever the case might be, having his family like just a text away, potentially even to come and pick him up if he's not feeling well, or what have you, is really valuable to him. On his face, again, we all get that as parents. On the other hand, you can look at that comment and say that kid is actually then, by having that text message link with his family during the school day, foregoing all of the infrastructure, the people at school who are there to support him and to hopefully keep him in school. Because as we know, there are times when life is hard, when you don't do well on something, when you're just not feeling great, but your work demands or your personal demands or your family demands demand that you stick it out and you continue on, you suck it up essentially. And so that's what school staff is there to do, to help that growth. And arguably by reaching out to families, whether they're a high schooler or a 7th grader or what have you, of course, depending on the circumstances, but in a lot of circumstances, maybe even most, having that ready connection between home and school may not be the healthiest. It's incumbent upon us to tee up that conversation, to provide information, and then allow parents to work with their kids at home, certainly, and then interact with our policy at school in an appropriate way. I hope that answers the question. I don't know that we would be in the business of consequencing parents who reach out during the school day. We very likely wouldn't do that, but it's really important that we have these conversations.
Great. Will the district commit to enhancing communication with parents and/or loved ones during emergency situations?
That's a really good question, and we've gotten that a couple of times. And part of that answer is we're always looking to get better at that. And so to the extent that we have, let's say, buildings who don't communicate when, let's say, a lockdown drill happens, there's good reasoning for that at times, and other times, you can argue maybe it's best that they communicate with families just so if it comes back home that they had a drill, that there's no question about what it was and what it wasn't. And I will tell you that all of our schools, and I was a school leader, and that can get tricky. But nevertheless, to the spirit of your question, it's really important that we maintain a really good communication channel with our families. And to the extent that any of our buildings or any of us are falling a little short there, that's always good feedback to have so we can get better. Kelly, I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
No, agree. Yeah, agree.
Go
So
a couple
this one
more minutes.
Yeah, I'm gonna make this a little more generic here. This one, because this one has some specific details. I was at a local park and there was a group of high school students sitting in the park, all on their cell phones. I asked the teacher about what was going on, and he said, "This is how we let students have a mental health break." I was shocked and couldn't believe that this was a thing in high school. Comments?
So one of the things that we have we're very fortunate in Douglas County to have a partnership with Douglas County, and we got a grant with the Opioid Council because we know that when students have poor mental health, they're at higher risk of developing unhealthy habits like drugs and alcohol. So to make a long story short, we got a grant from them and we went to Colorado State University's Prevention Research Center, and we are working with them and have developed, and it's launching within the next few days, a social media course for educators so educators can understand the impacts. So I did see one in here. Our kids going to get this information. We need to really train up our educators. We have teachers that grew up on cell phones that might not know some of the things like I didn't 3 or 4 years ago. So we're rolling out education to our staff right now. And then with that, there'll be snippets coming out to families. So we're in the business of educating, and that's a really good point. And I think that's just a misunderstanding because that staff member or teacher would need to understand how that could be harmful to mental health, depending upon what they're doing.
And if you haven't already, if you see anything like that, anything like that, feel free to reach out to the teacher or the principal to have that conversation.
Great. Quick one. Will this policy include headphones, AirPod usage?
I saw that one, and yet probably not. Well, I don't want to speak for Steve, but I don't think in this policy, but our school nurses do a lot around prevention, and they've shifted their role into healthy habits, and cell phones has come up. Also, this is not the venue for it, but electric bikes is another one that we're working on.
So I'll say from a policy perspective, you do the best you can to reflect the now and to incorporate what could be. So for example, we don't have a huge market for it now, but smart glasses might become a bigger market. So the question for us is, do we include that just to get out ahead of it? It falls within the same umbrella or the same kind of genus of like device that we're trying to get at. We're working through that. It's a really good question.
All right.
Let's do two more.
Two more. Okay. Let me find this. Got some good ones here. Going back to the lesson literature feedback, when you say we can do a lot more with education in schools, are there concurrent discussions, proposed plans to reinforce these lessons in the school setting, particularly in the most vulnerable impacted ages, middle school, high schools, specifically disseminating the evidence-based literature into impactful curriculum that addresses the science and mental health impacts? Contiguous learning is most impactful at home and at school.
Yeah, I haven't met a middle school or a high school that hasn't asked for resources from our department to enhance their education. So yes, to all of that, we're working on that right now. There's nobody that's saying to us, no, we're not going to do that. They're trying to integrate it into all the work that they're doing within the content.
And I would also say that we are trying to include as many parent resources as well. So if you look on our digital literacy website, there's a lot of information about how to help use the parental controls on your kids' devices and things like that to help manage some of those. We know we've had conversations with parents, and some of the parents are like, It's 7 o'clock. I'm taking all the devices away. Let's, get ready for our evening routine and those types of things. So there's a lot of information out there, and we're trying to help share that as much as we possibly can. Right.
One more.
Yep, one more. Trying to find a good one here. If you decide to ban cell phone usage or also not allow during passing periods, as a parent of a child who is overstimulated and anxiety prone, would we have to submit medical exemptions to allow a child to use their phone for listening to music to calm or to focus, things like that?
So I think what you're teeing up there is a 504/IEP conversation, and a 504 IEP. That interactive process is designed to all utterly help any kid with those needs. And that would be a conversation through that, and if that's where the IEP and or 504 landed, yes, the phone would be part of that in the context of a complete ban, which that was the question. I'm not saying that's where we will land. I'm saying that was the question. So certainly, those would be the policy would not overcome IEPs and 504s. That's not how that would go.
Okay.
Good question. So can't thank you all enough for being here. About 150 of you left. Mark, is there a way, if it's not already, can you just put that survey and or my contact information up again? So in case anybody didn't have their question answered, you can reach out to me if our FAQ doesn't take care of it. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to your building principal, your teachers. This is very much a team effort. And again, we're going to get to a good policy, a thoughtful policy because of these conversations. So again, thank you, and have a fantastic night. And Mark and Kelly, thank you so much.
Yep. And one last thing, I did put the link to the survey in the chat as well. A copy of the presentation and a recording of tonight's conversation will be posted on the website tomorrow. And then we will also be working on an FAQ for the 77 questions that we didn't have time to get to tonight. So we got a little bit of homework, but we really appreciate the conversation and the discussion with all of you. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.